of what the maybes and ifs were and the conspiracy theories. When I got to university to study law in my 40s, I discovered that these things were not conspiracy theories. They were actually happening. So this kind of was quite a big revelation for me. It was difficult to explain to other people. Actually, my Dean's commendation I got in the first year was actually a paper that I wrote to do with sovereign nations, and brought a lot of this in, but I was obviously at the time learning now how to actually make an intellectual argument or an academic argument in terms of just referring to different sources. And I actually got a Dean's commendation and of course a warning that I was on like sort of difficult territory. But what was happening there for me was getting the fact that everybody's thinking what if, what, but truthfully you can just go and see what is. But things are happening in the world is moving every minute, every day. So what we would have looked at then 40 years ago as this new world order being set up, well, that's been pretty much happening for the longest time, and the systems we have are all based on that. And in fact those systems also go right back for me to the rebellion of Lucifer, who decided at some point he was setting up his kingdom and has been trying every which way. You know, so that particular little thing about the New World Order has been put into place to a large degree. So the systems we have function there. Now, they may not have achieved their goal of a one world government, but they certainly facilitated this global elite having a huge impact on governments, capturing governments, really, in terms of even like, for example, South Africa. And they can cripple us in a second with downgrading us and all of these sort of things. So, or if you're
can I interrupt you there just to say, so when you talk about that global elite, is that synonymous in your thinking with the kind of financial control cabal, so to speak? In other words, going back to the whole thing of the Illuminati and the Rothschilds and the whatevers.
Yeah, because all of this is played about. All you had to do was amass enough of the world's money to have the say. It's a very practical thing.
Yes.
So then, of course, you're paying off certain people who start to amass money themselves, and then there's competition at those levels. But of course, you know, we know there's one agenda, in the sense that well, there's two agendas. There's God's agenda and there's Satan's agenda. So all of these other agendas play into one or the other. And for us, God's agenda is so specific and so clear that we should not, as far as I'm concerned, get caught up in all these other agendas. Yes, find them fascinating, laugh at them, do what we want to do in terms of seeing it. I know when I first got to Parliament, of course, with my head a lot in these things, and then having had that experience at university, I had a lot of people, then a huge onslaught of, you can't say this, you can't do that, you can't even feed the poor, because it's feeding into this one world agenda. And I really had to seek God on this. And for me, what he said to me was, greatest good for the greatest number. It's not your job to worry about what I do in terms of end times. Your job is to actually be my hands extended now.
That's it. That's it.
What good can you do in this scenario? You know, so the big picture, there is the big picture, but we are operating in the small picture, and we become entirely useless if we've got our heads constantly in the big picture and we don't operate in the small picture.
Yeah.
So I had to get very clear at that point what my job was, and not to try and do God's job. Not to tell God when the timing is, the deadlines are, who's going to do what. He's let us in on some of these things, as far as I'm concerned, so that we will not be anxious. So that when these things happen, we will actually, we will look up, and we will praise him, and we'll be full of joy, and we'll have his strength in that sense, so that we'll be able to be there for others. It's not that it's not going to be tough for us, but fighting it, if God has said it's going to happen, makes no sense to me, because we're using all our energy on fighting something that's not our battle.
No.
If he's allowing it, we have to see the opportunities
Yes.
that
Yes.
come within what he's allowed. You know, I take, for example, Ramaphosa being our president. As far as I'm concerned, I prayed before that election. I'm sure you did. I know a lot of people say they prayed. How did God answer? He gave us President Ramaphosa.
Yes.
So now, he's not going to be a perfect man because there's no such thing. But God has a plan. So he's going to do what he's going to do. Our job is to actually see how can we help that man be the best he can be? How can we help him have, you know, in terms of strengthening his arms where he is doing the right things. But what do we know about what's the right things? We know God has a plan. So yes, we can try and understand it to some degree. It's our human nature. You know, God hides things. We try and uncover them. You know, so this is the whole thing of science and whatever. So we have inquiring minds. But on the other hand, we're also created in his image, and he's a creator God. We need to create out of the situations we are handed. We can't make different situations most of the time. Sometimes we can, but most of the time we can't. So we actually have to focus on being creative within what circumstances we're given and with the tools that we're given, what we have there. It was like, it's about not what don't I have, it's what do I have. Moses, what do I actually have in my hand? You know? So that's kind of where my head was at with all of that. And then, of course, it's because I have been watching. I've been in international relations for some time, and I have been watching the developments. I watched also when Jacob Zuma annoyed global powers furiously when he insisted he wasn't going to relent on the BRICS thing. And you watch South Africa and Brazil, how their economies got hit big time, big message. You know what I mean? So these things interest me. They tend to amuse me because these people feel so big and so powerful, but they're only being able to do what God allows them to do. And if we see it, it's like often people use discernment to get angry or hate people. That discernment's there so we can pray for those people. You know, so again, anything that I sort of feel like, okay, that I'm maybe seeing or maybe not, I'm always aware that I don't know everything. I might be seeing a little tiny piece of that, but if I am, it's for the purpose of praying into the situation, not elaborating. And unless I'm some kind of writer and I want to do fictional books or something, then fine, run off with it. But not in terms of how are we going to be the kind of country that actually makes the best. Well, in our Christian community, how do we be the Christian community God intended us to be? I'm thinking of another thing that our president said is you know, obviously the fact that he mentioned New World Order brought this discussion into play. Right. Yeah, maybe I should just remind me, I want to say something about something else, but maybe I should just finish on this. My understanding is that he is unapologetically, his agenda is unapologetically an Africa in the world on equal terms, not the unbalanced situation that we've had. It is dealing with the huge inequality that we have in this country. That's not sustainable. We will all go up in flames if we don't do something about that in a natural sense. Now, for me, in a spiritual sense, we serve a God who's a just God. And he says that we do have to actually move in the direction of justice, and we do have to think about the poor, and we do have to look at situations of inequality. And I think we've tended to want to sweep those things under the carpet. Why? I don't know. Yes, we'll go and give little food handouts on certain days and whatever, but then pretend, we go back to our houses and pretend that people haven't gone back to their situations, and that one meal a week is going to actually make some difference. And we do know from a point of view of government that the systemic inequalities of the system is a problem. The system is set up in terms of this one world government where people can amass huge amounts of money and everybody on the back of everybody else. So now, so there's what we do as ordinary people. It depends where we're situated and what our job is. But if you are placed like Cyril Ramaphosa in this position here, would you not at least want to die trying, even if it's not possible, to deal with that inequality?
Of course.
But of course he's wise enough to know, or at least he's experienced enough to know, that he's in this one world system. So he knows that that world order exists, the one that we think of as being the new world order. So if he talks about a new order, he's talking about what he has in small part in his, what can you say, the desires God has given him to actually see a more equal South Africa, a more equal Africa, more equal between continents, between countries, and even within the countries. So this, in my understanding, is completely where his head's at. So he may speak with the language of the New World Order, because he's got to operate for now within that context. But if he's saying, but that's not new. That is what we have. So if he's talking new, just saying the word new order, and I've been suspecting obviously from before he became president that this would be the agenda. I'm expecting new things, and I'm expecting a really full-out attempt to bring in a new order that is far more just, and that looks that has a sense of equality, where people want to believe, well, they want to not just love their God, but love their neighbor as themselves. So these are the things. Now, so blinding, the world has, God is also in the business of blinding people's eyes when he wants to, and hardening people's hearts. And so people can be used in many different ways. And I see that when I talk about Trump, there's a whole lot of what has occurred to me. Because I mentioned in that little clip about, could it be that he'd be part of bringing down this world order? Not that he didn't try to be in this world order and running and calling the shots. He just doesn't like to be told no. He doesn't like to be told no by the American Constitution, and he certainly doesn't like to be told no by other global powers.
By the G8,
especially as he's sitting here as president. So if he did join with China and Russia in their agenda or whatever, if there is a linked agenda, I see the enemy working through separate agendas. They look as if they won, but they actually just are people's own agendas.
Yes.
And Trump's Trump is very impressed with himself. He really does see himself as big, as that big, and his intelligence that big. So he would have his agenda for wanting to get back at those global powers who think they've been running the United States for so long, and now he's president, it's his job to run it. But it doesn't matter. The point is, we can see these things. It's a show going on in front of us, while God has the plan, the overall plan. He'll let those move as far as they need to, and pull back and constrain. But his big thing is us get our backsides into gear and actually be him on the ground, and be part of those things that look like justice and more equality and caring about people. So the other thing that was just the church.
Yes. The church,
the president's last statement that's rattling people is the fact that we have to learn new ways of doing things.
Yes.
And he happened to add on to his long list, worship. He did, in my understanding, he did that because he is a Christian.
Yes, he is. And
when we have 5,000, 10,000 people all in one space, in spitting distance of each other, that is simply what he's referring to.
I know.
In terms of, let's not fight this, let's not waste our energy fighting this, find the new ways to do this. And of course, for me, for the longest time, I haven't liked what I've seen in terms of how the church looks, because to me, we should be more community-based. We should be those houses in the street that care about each other. So this doesn't panic me, but I do see why it's panicking other people.
Yeah, exactly.
So I thought I would just throw that in there.
No, that's very good, and I agree with you 100%. I do think one of the byproducts of this thing has been the fact that the church has been forced out of consumerism back to, like you said, community, real community.
Yeah.
And that
does my neighbor have food on their table?
Yeah,
Before I
precisely.
hit them with the Bible.
Precisely. And so from that point of view, I agree completely. And it's been interesting to watch how the churches that have been most vocal in protesting that they must be given the right to gather, both in the States and some here, are the ones who are most dependent on that fact for their livelihood,
For their existence in the form that they're in.
Yeah, because they basically are trying to keep very bloated systems of gathering and everything that they do in place, keeping them afloat financially, etc. So I agree with you 100% on that. And so you were making that point in response to the fact that Christians heard in him saying a new way of worship, that he was trying to promote a new religion. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think people are reading too deeply into it.
Yes.
And even if there was a need to read deep, or was something deep into things, what do we know what people are thinking? We don't know, but God knows. But the point is, we're to believe the best in each other, and we know our job. We know what we're supposed to do. And part of that is to be anxious for nothing. And when we see these signs, look up, not start getting an army together and everybody getting guns and defending us from what?
Yeah.
So this is our opportunity. And of course, those people who are at the head of this are not the enemy. We know who the enemy is. Those people God wants saved as much as anyone else. And we think about Saul becoming Paul. It's there is no one that he is not concerned is not going to have the greatest opportunity to change, to have their hearts touched, softened, changed, their minds changed. So our behavior is key.
Yes.
And we're not acting, as far as I can see, and I mean, I'm only looking from a limited point of view, and I'm sure many people are acting the way we're supposed to be acting. But from what I'm seeing, we have a tendency, that's not our default mode. It should be our default mode. So, so my passion at the moment is, let's change our default mode.
Precisely, Cheryl. I think that is exactly the point. You know, I have also for some years been saying this to the church wherever I could, and that is the fact that we are too used to being the church as a kind of state church, as a kind of, you know, in a position of protection and privilege, which was the case under apartheid, and it's been the case, for example, in America for much longer than that, where it's a kind of, you know, the thinking. You and I had this conversation when I came to talk to you about my views about the ACDP and if you like, what should our stance and our positioning of ourselves be with regard to national politics? So it's all kind of, these things all for me form a kind of a structure, and that is to say, it's not that the church is supposed to choose weakness and persecution and any of those things, but it is the fact that history shows us that the church has always been at its best in terms of the kingdom of God when it's been at its most disadvantaged in regard to the national kind of political landscape. But unfortunately, when people are talking about, you know, we need to restore whatever, we need to restore family values, all of these things, they're including in that a very self-centered agenda, which is we want to be the protected species again. We want to be the people in a place of privilege because we are Christian, and Tisanakis, and because we're white and we're the people who brought Christianity to the dark continent and all of that stuff, you know. So there's this.
It's got a very racist edge, and people don't even know it. They can't hear it or see it in themselves.
No, they can't.
And I think the big thing for me was also just coming to grips with the fact in the last 20 years, say, that I can be wrong. So, and I think it's a very empowering thing, because we know what we think we know. We make certain sense of that. We put it out there, but we're not God. No. He says his ways are not our ways, and his thoughts are certainly not our thoughts. So the chance that we can be wrong is huge. And we have such an arrogance. We have no humility. And of course, we know how God feels about arrogance. And we know that humility is key to people actually being contaminated by this gospel that we do want to share. You know, so that for me is important. And then, of course, people who will look at characters like Trump. Now, I have no doubt that God is going to use him, but I don't think it's anywhere vaguely in the way people think, because he's the most arrogant, the least humble. He's everything that God will tell us he despises. So we have to pray for that man. Because he is hugely problematic, but he's not a problem for us, except that we want him to be as saved as anyone else, or less deceived. Because, you know, obviously people say they saved or think they saved or whatever, and maybe he is despite his deception, but the deception is huge. You can see it. Now, what worries me about Christians is that they want to stand by things even when they really don't see Jesus in that situation. And I don't mean don't stand by them. I mean be there to lift that person up and point them on the right way, but and not pull them down and not be happy for their destruction. And don't pray for their destruction, but don't idealize people, because we are people. We all can actually be deceived at any one time, So the body, it does worry me so that a little bit, because I feel like the body of Christ is so vulnerable in a sort of big way. But we have these opportunities like now where people are looking for what you're saying. And it's huge. It's amazing, because we can sow seeds of, let's get back to basics. I call it Christianity 101.
Absolutely.
If we let go of everything else and just think about being gracious, forgiveness, loving our God, loving our neighbor, simple. We don't have a big burden. We actually, life can be fairly simple for us. But being judgmental and thinking that we have to pick up arms to do whatever and do God's job because he's too slow, he's too stupid, or whatever, to have done things, that for me is completely lunatic.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you see, again, coming back to your earlier point, I think the problem with... Can
I have coffee while we're chatting?
Of course. I've got my water. I've had more than enough coffee today already. But look, with regard to this thing of how the two things of what we think of a person and where we position ourselves politically, that's, as you said, the big challenge of the day, which is, you know, so when you think about the fact that, for example, God raised up a Babylonian king, Cyrus, and he said, I'm sending, and he in fact calls him my anointed. He actually says, I'm anointing him to do a particular job with regard to my people. And so he becomes the liberator of the Jewish people in Babylon at the same time as he is, and God anoints him for that. At the same time, that doesn't mean that either the system of Babylon or even that person is righteous and, you know, on their way to heaven, and you must take the task that they're doing and you must superimpose over that their political affiliation and say, therefore, you know, because Cyrus is a Babylonian. Therefore, we say, Babylon, we love you. You need to maintain
Absolutely.
critical distance. You need
Absolutely.
to maintain what I call prophetic distance, to be able to speak truth to power at the same time as encouraging the person in power when they are doing the right thing. And that's the division the church has not been able to make, or very, very few people in the church have been able to make.
You're touching on a really important space here in terms of how people view themselves within the politics that they understand to be before them. For example, people may have a problem with policies of a certain party, like the ANC.
Yes.
And what if they just speak to those problems they have with the policies? First of all, what is wrong with that policy? What is it actually happening on the ground? But you've got to do some work to do that. Most people are speaking because they think they've been told that this is what the outcome is. They haven't actually been on the ground and seeing, okay, where that policy is at play, what is it producing? And if there was a different policy, would it produce, what evidence do we have somewhere else that it would produce another way? We all just regurgitate what we've heard. I mean, we do that because that's how we learn as kids. We regurgitate what we've heard. But at some point, we have to start thinking about what we're thinking. And why are we thinking that? And if we want change, for goodness sake, we can't just be these crazy lunatics changing for the sake of change, because people's lives are at stake. And also, while we're tied up doing that, we don't do the job that we're supposed to do. But there's a difference between speaking to the problem, or being disrespectful and completely. People are horrendous the way they tear down people.
Terrible.
God's creation, the one He's put there. How is that person ever going to hear you if you are saying those vile things? Demeaning him, ripping at his integrity, his dignity, whatever, her. Why would they ever open their ears to you? You are just shutting ears now.
They're cutting their ears off,
Yes. So how we actually communicate and relate what we're trying to say is so important, particularly as Christians, because from what I see, and even what I saw in my 20 years, because I worked with this, I was convinced the way God was showing me that, and it was an immediate response. I showed respect, I got tenfold respect back. When I spoke with respect or graciously, and the fact that being generous, giving people the benefit of the doubt, I got that back a millionfold. It's so inspiring. It's so huge. It's not something that you don't see the results of. So when we do want to fix a problem, and that person is the one who can fix it, the first thing you have to do is, how can we get that person's ears open? We think we have some wisdom to impart in a situation, but he has to hear it first, or they have to hear it. Now, so there's stuff we have to do. So when we see things going wrong, my conclusion over the last 20 years was that there's a reason it's going wrong. It's because we have not disciplined ourselves to be what we need to be and to do it the way we need to do it to actually get the results. We keep doing the same thing, getting the same results, and then patting ourselves on the back because, see, we told you those people were so bad. Now, for example, you just have to be within a Christian party to get despondent about human nature, because there's no such thing as a perfect man or woman. And people, unfortunately, do have ego problems. And a lot of people in the church will not, we know that we know that we know, or we don't. And in fact, all we do is that we have a hope. And then we decide to have faith in that hope. And one day we'll know. But we don't actually know. We have some kind of confirmation, we have experiences, things we feel, and also we have the evidence of when you do things this way, certain things happen. So we have little glimpses of that. But we don't know that we know that we know. And we certainly don't know that about people when we're trying to condemn people to hell. The thing we do know is that God tells us that the world has fallen, everything is in need of redemption, everyone is in need of redemption, but everything and everyone is redeemable. And I think that's the big thing that we forget when whether we're talking about global powers, because remember, Lucifer had the agenda.
Yes.
Has the agenda.
Yes.
Those people are in his grips.
Yes.
And it's very
The
simple.
God of this world.
Everybody's hero, Trump. He's also in the grips of that, because it's me, and these people are touching my bank account and my glory and what. So there's a lot of me involved in all of these things. Now we cut each other slack because we know we're human beings, and so this happens. So we pray for each other, and we try and share those seeds of doing it a different way, being different. Don't let the man just run into hell.
Yeah.
But at the same time, just abusing people does not open their ears. It does not soften their heart. It does not make them want to actually listen to us. Anyway, so I've rambled on, but it's great.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. So from the point of view of if you, and again, I agree with everything you've said, both in terms of how we need to position ourselves with regard to the difference between leaders and politics, or leaders and policies. Where again, the New Testament tells us to pray for our leaders. It doesn't at the same time, it raises its voice to criticize what was the common practice of the political parties of the day, or what were the practices of the political parties, as well as other people's religious practices, etc., etc. It does all of those things because, as you said, we are motivated by both grace and truth. Love on the one hand, and God's word on the other hand, or God's nature on the other hand. And so we have to continue to be that witness, holding up light in darkness, etc., etc. And the fact of how we position ourselves with regard to, let's take the president, when he speaks as the president of the country. We are hearing the heart of the person. We are also hearing something of the mix of his ideology, his stand with regard to certain policies. And as you say, many of those they interface in the person. So his new order, or his desire for a new reality in Africa, is somewhat influenced by his Christian values, and so things like, empowerment of the people, justice, eliminating poverty, correcting structures that create inequalities, and so on. All of those are that mix, and of course that is also then filtered through the politics. The same way with Trump, as you were saying. So the fact that you say when you receive the good that the person is saying, and of course you maintain enough critical distance that you're also able to say, no, when you said that, I totally disagree with you, and that is a violation of Christian values, or of the Word of God, or something. At the same time, that doesn't mean that therefore, in our case, we all vote ANC from now forward because we have this president, who's a Christian, but that we are able to conduct ourselves with regard to our political views without confusing the two things, either for good or for bad, either positively or negatively. In the same way as we did with Nelson Mandela. We were able to applaud and receive the good that the person was personifying, without necessarily voting for the party he represented.
And keeping in mind, obviously, no two people think alike. I mean, even a husband and wife. I mean, there's going to be things you don't think alike on.
Yeah.
So it's right down to that. So there's no ways in a political party everybody's going to think alike. So for you to have any sort of unity of purpose, you have to come to the understanding that we agree on enough things that are important, so that the things we disagree on, we will have discussions in the right order and place with the right dignity, etc., etc. And hopefully people's minds will change. And that's in God's hands, about changing people's minds. I lived there for 20 years. I disagreed with many things, but there were enough things I agreed with to know that we needed to accomplish those things. We needed to have that kind of unity. So you make that kind of decision.
Yes.
But at the same time, when we in politics, people have a tendency as Christians to become fairly fake, because they're playing the game of politician, but putting this facade over it is that everything they do or say is somehow righteously motivated or whatever.
Yes,
well, it's not.
Yes.
It's not, because when you're in politics, your goal is to get the power out of the hands of that other person. So you actually are in that game of politics, which is the power play. And pretending that you're not, for me, it became hugely problematic, because I just could not pretend that I was not. I had to be clear and differentiate. When I said this and did this, it was for this purpose. This is what I think broadly. This is what I think I have to do narrowly to get that result. So there's a lot of thinking that people have to do. And, you know, I feel as if in our charismatic churches from way back, we got into a strange place where people told us that if you reason, it's something demonic, you know. And I had that scripture where God says, come, let us reason together, you know. And I thought, well, that was like my saving grace, because it stopped me putting my brain. But for a period, I did put my brain completely on hold and let other people, often male and younger than me, talk all sorts of stuff into my head, or read, you know, or you read it or whatever. We do have to reason, but not for the purpose of hating that person or exposing them or what. Maybe we get the opportunity, if we're placed in the right place, to speak into their life. We have to earn their trust first and all of those things. So it's a huge, big process. It's not just I get that feeling about you, and out you go. In those situations where you're not in the right place, you pray. And ask God to send the right people in that situation. So there is no perfect political party. There never will be. You have to decide if you agree with enough of the things that are important to them to be able to stomach the other crazy thoughts and ideas that go along with it. Because that's the way our politics works.
That's it.
I prefer the idea myself of being able to look at one person and say, yes, with all that one person's faults,
that's right,
I would put my vote there.
I support that person. Yes.
So
that's why we actually, that's why we need a constituency-based system.
Absolutely. Now, of course, the ACDP, for example, would never have existed, and I probably wouldn't exist in the form I am today if that ACDP hadn't existed. So there was a good there was a good spin-off in terms of the fact that we didn't have that constituency-based thing. But at the same time, you know, we got to keep our minds open to the fact that when are we old enough as a country to have that? Because then that person we hold accountable.
That's right.
But it's never going to be easy for politicians, because they have, as I said, no two people think alike, and you're trying to actually please a whole lot of people at the same time. And in that regard, Ramaphosa does an incredible job. However, he's not perfect. No. And he doesn't pretend to be perfect. He knows he's human. He knows that a lot of things are going to be trial and error, whether you like it or not, and you can't please all of the people all of the time. But you can care about all of the people all of the time. And I think that's what he's trying to put across. And it's what I appreciate. And, you know, he could die any day trying. But he is putting his 100% into that. And so for that, I really see God's hand there. And I sort of, I have huge hope for this country because, of course,
Yeah.
even the craziness, I mean, we overly idealistic. We all want perfection all of the time, which is, is not going to happen. But even in that idealism, there is that sense that we want better. You know, so it's a good motivation at the end of the day.
Yeah, and as you said, I think as long as every step of the way we are maintaining the heart of God in the sense of compassion, of caring for the poor, of justice, you know, for everyone.
Checking our own motives.
Yeah, checking our own motives, making sure, as you said, the thing about humility and arrogance. For me, that's the big war in regard to. I was thinking about it this morning on my walk and just praying it through. You know, this thing about how the social media empower opinion. So everyone has an opinion, and everyone feels compelled to post their opinion. And so what we have is a whole lot of opinion out there. And as you said, it's very difficult to read the heart of the person behind the opinion. And so all that happens is that people are having these clashes and arguments and whatever. And
you know what's interesting? Even in the clashes, you pick up that people haven't actually read the article that they're clashing about.
Yes.
And that's distressing because it is such a waste of time.
Yes.
You know, we have a knee-jerk reaction. We'll read the first sentence.
Yes.
We have our story nicely in place. We don't want anything to disturb that. And if that first sentence has disturbed that, well, we come out with a tape recording of what we know, or we just press share with something if we think we like that first sentence. But people are very lazy to read. And I mean, there's times that I can be tired as well, and you've just scanned something. Yeah. And then you realize, whoops, I should
the wrong horse.
You can't get the heart of something unless you really kind of and even because of different people's cultures and languages, there are people who mean something really far different to what they write there.
Very much so.
You got to kind of discern as much as you can actually read, you know.
Very much
so. But the one response, of course, is that we should actually be acknowledging people and giving them a sense of self-worth, value, and winning their trust, so that when we do share something, they at least listen. You know. So I'm working on it.
That's very good. And your experience, I think, is a very valuable, not only lesson for you, but a valuable thing to teach others. You know, from your experience, that whole thing you said about sowing honor and you get it back 100-fold. I think that's the kind of attitude change that is necessary in the world, but starting with our own country.
Yeah, and it doesn't happen by accident. You actually have to make it happen.
Yes.
You've got to consciously change your mind about those things.
Yes. So listen, I wanted to ask you, are you writing your story?
I have written my story.
Oh.
Somebody did offer to publish, but of course we had shut down, and I don't think anyone knows whether they're coming or going. Yeah. So I have my story. Maybe I can send it to you just so that you can make a comment on what value you think it has or not, and to include in the book when it does get published.
I'd love that.
So I have it there. It'll be tough reading for people because I don't necessarily think the way everybody else thinks, but it's worth reading to the end.
Well, good. Okay, so send me that. You can either just send it as an attachment or put it in Dropbox or whatever, and just let me have the link. I'd love to read it. And you know, on this subject right now, to kind of diffuse some of the nonsense that is going on out there, keep saying the things you said in that post you put up.
Thank you.
You know, we need We need the voices of sanity to slow people down and to stop them being in this reactionary place. And to remember that our job is to be the church, first and foremost. And after that, you can have your little arguments on the side. But don't start off with the arguments on the side that, as you said, have the effect of cutting people's ears off.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I was just thinking about my book, of course, it's called Through My Eyes, Life, Politics, Religion.
Oh, you didn't, you mentioned it.
But if I had to put one word that God gives me about it, it would be grace. And it's a strange book, because when you read it, you won't even think about it. And I probably don't use that word once, but that would be it. And in a sense, but remember, it cuts off at the time just before lockdown.
Yeah.
So right on the edge of lockdown. So he sort of gave me a picture for another book. And of course, if I had to sum up, it won't be called Truth, but it would be around, and you mentioned that thing about truth, because a lot of what we think we must find the exact facts, or we don't have the truth. We have the truth. It's Jesus. His name is Jesus.
Yes.
It's the truth. Yes. All these other things are just things that people do or don't do or have said or didn't say. Has nothing to do actually with truth. So it's a very interesting topic, but also in the setting, obviously, of starting from lockdown and all of the stuff that's going on. So my head is quite excited at some point.
Good.
But I would like the other book to be published first.
Yeah.
Because it feels like that was the olden days.
Yeah. Did you say that you have a publisher? There is someone that is willing to publish it for you.
Yes, but whether they'll be in a position to do it or not, I don't know. So I'm still kind of open to how things pan out, you know. As I say, this has hit everybody in a crazy way. Otherwise,
you may have to go the route of self-publishing, which is a lot of people are doing these days. Although it doesn't have the same power necessarily, especially for distribution. But that may be the route to go if that company is not going to survive the lockdown.
Yeah, I sort of had that in mind before, and then of course with the lockdown, you kind of put those things a little bit, because you would want to be able to actually, mind you, what am I talking about? We have this. We can talk about these things. I was going to say you'd want to be free to be able to be everywhere to talk about, so that people can challenge you on what you've said, because because that's the importance of throwing out these thoughts and ideas.
Yes.
So, but yes, we have this kind of thing, which maybe is where it should go.
I think this is going to be the future. There's going to be a lot of what used to be in person and through, for example, written form and other formats, that's going to become electronic communications in the future.
Yeah, when I think of how much it costs for the airplane and the hotels and the whatever to get to speak to maybe 50 people if you're lucky.
Yes.
It doesn't actually make sense anymore.
Yeah.
But now that we've tried this new way, trying new ways is a good thing.
Very good.
Yeah.
Well, so, this is wonderful. Thank you for giving this time, and I've recorded it, and I'm going to then send you the link, because what it told me is that I don't have space on my laptop so it is recording it to the cloud. So it's now just a matter of my limited technological brain being able to work out how to do that. So,
I know we 50s kids are like we sort of doing amazing stuff with all this crazy technology.
Yes. Like somebody said, you know, when in doubt, hire a teenager. That's what I need.
Sure.
I need a teenager right now.
I'm missing my tech bots who are probably all over the place.
Yes.
Yeah. Good.
Okay. Well, thank you again for the time, and send me that manuscript.
Thank you. That will be great.
Okay.
Look forward to your response. Okay.
All right. Good. God bless you, Cheryllyn. Give my best to Dimitri.
Thank you. Will do.
Okay. God bless.
And to your family as well.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.